Hey, welcome to Power Positioning. This training is awesome. If you want people to like you and want to buy your stuff before you have the opportunity to actually try to sell them your stuff, then right here, you're in the right place. This is what this training is all about. I really hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and get started. So, in order to do all of this stuff right, I need to first introduce you to the 3 rings of lasting success when it comes to promoting yourself and positioning yourself as someone people should pay a lot of money to. What, you didn't like the green screen there? So anyway, here's the deal. Ring number 1 is going to be the promise, all right? The promise is the thing you say about your stuff. Now, the promise is often supported by, and to a degree, made more palatable by something called positioning, all right? Positioning is what they think of you before you actually make the promise. If you have good positioning, they're going to be more inclined to listen to the promise. If you have bad positioning, they're not going to listen to the promise at all. But what's really cool is the thing that precedes positioning is something called the big idea. Now, let's talk about first the promise, okay? So the promise is basically when you say something like, buy my stuff and you will be happy. Now, interestingly, this is where 99% of all marketers and all campaigns put their focus. Look at my product. Look how great my product is. My product is absolutely fantastic. And you know what? It works pretty good. That's why 99% of people are doing it. But there's a better way. It's usually the first thing they say when communicating with a prospect, by the way. The opening conversation is almost always about the big promise. Again, pretty effective. However, least effective thing that you could do. Now, fortunately for us, that is in fact the least effective thing you could do. And the reason it's fortunate for us is because if we do what works while our competition does the least effective thing, we've instantly got an unfair advantage. So where do we need to start? Where does our thinking need to begin? It needs to begin with something that we call the big idea. Now, before I teach you what the big idea is and how to find it, I want to give you a word of caution. Crafting the perfect big idea is like writing a hit song. It's rarely something that happens overnight. It's rarely something that happens instantly. So what I want to do with you right now in this segment of this training is I'm going to walk you through an exercise on how to come up with the big idea, and I want you to give yourself permission to not actually get it right. Give yourself permission to brainstorm. So what I want you to do is do this exercise as we go through this training to the best of your ability, get your mind working, and then just walk away from it and do something else. And what usually happens is I know it sounds hokey, but your subconscious will do most of the work for you if you just point it in the right direction. I know, sounds ridiculous. Test it. See if it works for you. Usually works for me, okay? So let's talk about the big idea. The big idea is the thing that grabs your market's attention and presents the promise in a new and possibly even unusual way. I want you to think of the big idea as a single way to encapsulate what's really cool about what you have to offer. No, it's not a USP, it's not a unique selling position, it's actually one level higher than that. It is a way to open the door of your prospect's mind with one single combination of words. That's what the big idea is. It is truly magical and very, very powerful. This is really the thing that makes you different. If you can wrap a big idea around a common commoditized product, you now have something completely decommoditized and uncommon. I'll walk you through exactly how that works here in a minute, giving you some examples, really good ones, by the way. All right? In today's world, here's the thing. Here's why this is important. In today's world, everybody has heard just about every promise under the sun, and we've all been disappointed to some degree, right? But if our prospects have heard every promise out there already and they're jaded, we got to be different. We got to stand out. Now, here's the good news. See, most people try to stand out just by being louder, just by making bolder promises. Hey, let's make the headline in red, right? Let's have flashy videos instead of regular videos. Let's make even bigger claims. Well, here's the thing. That's totally stupid. That is the least effective way to go about doing it. And gosh, you and I hope that they all keep it up. See, the better way is to focus on the big idea. So like I said earlier, coming up with the big idea is difficult. It takes time, and it's something you don't want to rush. Give yourself permission to stew on this for a while, okay? You don't have to get it overnight. Usually takes a while. That's okay. So how do you do it? Well, one of the best ways of coming up with a big idea is to look at these questions, okay? So I'll give you the questions, and then we'll kind of go through what they really mean. Number one is, what is the promise? Number two is, how do I fulfill that promise in a way that's different from what the market is used to hearing? Now see, we're already starting to take a slightly different approach. We can start with a promise, that's ordinary, but now we're looking at ways to make that promise unique. And some of the things we need to focus on is, what is their greatest desire? And finally, what unique way can I address that desire that will get their attention? So let me give you some examples of big ideas that I've successfully seen or come up with. How do you successfully see a big idea? You know what I mean. Some big ideas that I've seen or come up with or facilitated, all right? So as you're doing this, I'm going to give you a piece of paper that sort of has all of this on here, so you might want to get that out. So as we're going through this, I kind of want you to be jotting down some ideas for your own stuff as we go through it. So first thing we do is we address the desire of the market, okay? So about a year or so ago, I was holding a workshop, and at the workshop was an attendee, and her business was to help frazzled parents finally get their children to sleep, okay? Any of you with kids know what that's like. I'm a 4-time veteran of that game. Boy, do I ever know what that's like, you know what I mean? So, man, when your kid's going nuts and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, there is no amount of money you would not pay to get a good night's sleep. So what a great business to be in. So here's the thing. This is their desire. Get my baby to go to sleep, please, right? So what's the promise? Well, the promise is, I'll teach you to get your baby to go to sleep. So the danger there, all right, is that everybody's heard that promise before. Okay, I mean, if you go to Amazon.com and you look for new parenting books, there's like a zillion of them, how to get your kid to go to sleep. So I'm going to help you get your baby to go to sleep is not new to the marketplace. They've probably heard it. They've tried a lot of things. They're likely jaded, just like every other market in the world. By the way, right? Everybody's jaded. It's okay. They should be. All right? So I'm talking to the lady, and we're trying to hash this out. And I start saying, okay, well, I'm digging a little deeper. And I said, well, how do you fulfill this promise? How do you make this happen in a way that's kind of unique? This may be different from what everyone else does. And her answer was this. She says, well, babies naturally sleep if you just recognize their sleep cues. I was like, really? She's like, yeah. Basically, what we're doing as parents is we're like screwing everything up. We keep the kid awake by trying to put them to sleep instead of recognizing their natural sleep cues. I'm like, weird. And she goes, yeah. And basically her delivery method was she would train the parent and not the child, right? And I think she is the one that actually said these words. The big idea that came out of this conversation was born to sleep. Born to sleep. That was the big idea. Now, here's what I want you to think of this as. The big idea is a series of words, a very small phrase that has one purpose, and that purpose is to open the door for a conversation with that prospect, either literally or online in print or whatever. So the big idea, this phrase isn't designed to sell her program. This isn't designed to make this promise. The big idea's sole purpose is to open that door, right? So if you think of the prospect's mind as a door, the big idea is just turning the knob just a little bit. That's all it does. So here's the thing. Once you come up with something that can be used as a big idea, in this case, born to sleep, right? Her premise is, or her delivery method is, and everything that she built her system on is around the idea that babies are born to go to sleep. They don't have a hard time sleeping. We keep them awake, right? So the next phase of this, and coming up with all of this, is to now find the premise. What supports this big idea? The premise is basically your way of explaining the big idea. So imagine we're having a conversation with a frazzled parent. Dad wants kid to sleep. Mom wants kid to sleep even worse, right? Because we dads get out of child rearing a lot. We have a good gig there. God helped us. Biology is on our side when it comes to having little young children. So mom's really desperate for the kid to go to sleep. And she's like, oh, you don't have a problem. Your baby is born to sleep. The sole thing that this little phrase is meant to do is to cause that parent to say, what do you mean? That's it. Boom. What? What are you talking about? It's just a way to get that interest. That's it. To throw that prospect's mind slightly off balance. This is where the premise comes in. The premise is basically a statement that defends or supports this big idea. In this case, here was my client's premise. She said to me, bush babies don't stay up all night. When she said bush babies, she meant babies that were born in the Australian outback, such as Aboriginal babies, babies that are born in rainforests in Central America, Eskimo babies. They don't stay up all night. You actually can read about this, because I became fascinated with it because I met her right when my little daughter, Katya, was still in that phase of howling very, very regularly, and it's true. These cultures don't have the problems that we have. Their babies sleep like rocks, man. It's amazing, right? So here's the thing. Babies aren't designed to stay up all night, and babies that don't have all of the modern distractions sleep pretty good. Parents are keeping the baby awake by accident because we're missing sleep cues, all right? So the final step here is here's how, right? Here's how. So if we're having an imaginary conversation with a parent, you got frazzled mom, and my client says, you don't have a problem, your child's born to sleep. That one big idea statement. Sole purpose is to fuel up the parent's desire to hear the premise, which, oh yeah, look, think about it. Bush babies, outback babies, Eskimo babies, babies in the Amazon rainforest, they don't stay up all night. Parents are keeping babies up by accident. Here's how. Here's how gives way to the next phase, which is education, establishing positioning through education, all right? But let's stick with the big idea for now. So that was one way that we came up with a big idea around this, all right? Let's talk about something that's highly commoditized, all right? So first of all, I'll walk you through it. The big idea is born to sleep. Then we establish the premise, yeah, bush babies don't stay up all night. You're keeping your kid up all night. Next thing we do is we say, here's how. Now we can start establishing positioning through education. Here's how. Here's the ways you're keeping your kid up. Here's some ways to make them go to sleep. And then finally, that positioning opens the door to us to be able to make the promise. In this case, I will teach you how to get your baby to sleep. That's the promise. Now, if we went to that prospect and said, I'll teach you how to get your baby to sleep, the mom would say, yeah, right. If we precede that promise with born to sleep and the premise, boop, the mind is wide open for the promise. You see? See how it works? Let me give you another example, okay? So check this one out. At that same workshop, strangely enough, we hit it twice in a row in one workshop, which is very, very rare, at another client. And the client was in the business of selling reputation management, specifically helping doctors get their patients to leave good reviews. So the doctors had a key desire, which was to get patients to leave good reviews about them online. So his promise to them was, of course, I will help you and teach you to consistently get good reviews from your customer. And then he joined the ranks of every other person who was cold calling that doctor every 15 minutes, making the same promise. So he's got a problem, right? Remember, we can't lead with promises anymore. That's not going to set us apart. He can maybe make the promise louder. I'm going to teach you how to get 1 billion good reviews or something, but that would kind of be a load of BS, so that'd get you in trouble. So you got to have a better way. So during the workshop, I started asking the traditional questions, which is, well, first of all, how do you deliver this? How do you do it? Tell me what's different. And he goes, well, what I do is I focus on the staff. I train the staff to ask properly, A, and then I know that even when the patient agrees to leave a good review, they're probably going to forget, so I've created an automated follow-up system that ensures the customer leaves a good review. I was like, oh, well, you know what's setting you apart right here is the automated follow-up system that ensures it works. Because they've heard people say, I'll teach you to get good reviews all the time, and they've heard about training their staff, and they've probably tried it and failed. This is different. This is different. So the big idea we came up with was predictable evangelism. We use this phrase, predictable evangelism, to encapsulate the primary benefits of the results of his promise. Now remember, we're not using this as a headline. We're not making this as a commercial or anything. What we're doing is, metaphorically, if we're having that conversation with the doctor who needs more good reviews, the doctor's going, man, I need more good reviews. And the guy's going, oh, let me guess, your staff knows what to do and they like you. They're just not leaving the good reviews because they forget. And he's like, yeah. And he goes, oh, what you need is predictable evangelism. Boom. That phrase is not designed to have him go, oh, God, here, take my money. For the love of God, predictable evangelism, here it is. Here's $5 million. No. That's not going to happen. Instead, he's going to hear predictable evangelism and go, wait, what's that? That's all it's meant to do. That's all it is meant to do. It opens, remember, we're now turning the knob, We've turned the knob. Our next phase is start pushing that door open. We do that with the premise. So in his mind, if he's saying, well, what's predictable evangelism? Well, here we go. We established the premise. Oh, yeah. See, customers, of course, can be trained to leave positive reviews, but if you got a systematic way of doing it, you can make sure they leave the positive reviews instead of just asking them to get the positive reviews. Here's how. Boom. The words here's how now lead into establishing positioning by educating that client, or in this case, that customer. All right, so let's have a look here. The big idea was predictable evangelism. It opens the door for him to establish the premise. Oh yeah, predictable evangelism. What's that? Oh, well, dude, yeah, of course. I mean, all the customers know and they want to leave good reviews, but you got to have a system that ensures they actually do it, and that's got to be automated so you don't have to think about it. Oh, what's that? Well, here, let me show you how it works. Blam. Now we're establishing positioning through educating that customer, and finally, once you establish that positioning, now we can make the promise, which I think is probably hard to see on the screen here, but it says, the promise is, I will train your staff and install the system that gets you the good reviews. Really, really simple. If we went to the doctor with the promise, we would fail, right? If we go to the doctor with a big idea, which opens the door for positioning, we are successful. See, let me give you another one, okay? So if we go through, now this, talk about the most commoditized thing ever, all right? Now this is a $1 billion big idea. Wish I came up with it, I didn't, unfortunately. But I do have one of the representatives of this company as a client in one of my groups. So this is how I kind of get some inside information, all right? So one of the most commoditized thing in the world is the desire to lose weight fast, right? I mean, talk about a gazillion-dollar industry, all right? Desire to lose weight fast, okay? So the promise here is buy P90X, oops, there we go, buy P90X and you'll get shredded. So says every other exercise program in the world 5 million times a day, okay? So they're not any different. So now, if we're looking at P90X and we were to say, well, what's your delivery method? How are you fulfilling this promise, all right? Well, now they would answer, they'd say, well, the way it works is, A, it's hard as hell. B, you're constantly changing your workouts, and you combine this intense cardio and weights and everything, and by doing that, it's a little bit more effective. Well, you already know what the big idea is, right? You know what it is. For P90X, you've seen the commercials 1 billion times. Why? Because they work. What's the big idea? Muscle confusion, right? Muscle confusion. So if you're talking to someone who wants to lose weight and they're frustrated and they've tried everything and it hasn't worked as quickly as they wanted to or as efficiently as they wanted to, you say, oh, dude, you got to have muscle confusion. That's how to get defined quicker. They say, what's that? Boom. That's all this is doing. There's a 2-word combination that encapsulates the primary benefits and difference of this right here, of P90. That's all it is. Quick little phrase, boop, designed to open that door. Now that we've opened the door, we're going to push the door open a little bit more with the premise. The premise behind muscle confusion is traditional workouts have limited results because your body gets used to it. Well, you got to constantly shock the system for maximum impact. And then the magic words are, here's how, right? Here's how to do it. So if we looked at a P90X infomercial, it would follow this almost to the letter, by the way. Almost to the letter, all right? So if we look at it in the big circles, what you got here is muscle confusion. That's your big idea. Establish a premise. Oh yeah, dude, you got to shock your body by confusing the muscles all the time, gets you faster gain. Here's how it works. Blam. You're establishing your positioning through education, right? Oh yeah, there's 15 different ways you can do a bicep curl, blah, blah, blah. Makes blood go to the muscles. It absorbs glycogen faster. I don't even know what that means. I'm just saying stuff, hoping it sounds right. Okay, and then finally, buy P90X. Do the P90X workouts. You'll get ripped fast. If we led the infomercials and all we did was make the promise, there wouldn't be any Beachbody. It wouldn't happen, right? The success of that entire campaign is here, which leads to this, which then opens the door for this. So muscle confusion turns the knob. Positioning opens the door. Now you can walk in and make the promise, right? If you don't do the other stuff, you're making promise outside of the doorway to the mind. You're in trouble, okay? I'll give you one from my own business. This will be our last example, I think, of a big idea. So for my professional services business, the desire of my market is automated marketing and sales. So my promise is use our service and we'll help you increase sales through automation. So, I mean, we have the benefit of being the only people in the history of the internet to make that promise. No, of course not. Everybody has made that promise. They've heard it 1 billion times and it's never worked and they're mad, right? They're like, oh, it was confusing, it was terrible, then I got it and it didn't work and it was okay, but blah, 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 blah. I'm jaded. Of course you're jaded, I understand, right? You should be. So the question I had to ask our team, which is, okay, well, what about our stuff is different? How are we delivering this in a way that's making it special? And, well, what's different about our stuff is our system has multiple contingency plans for people who don't respond, right? We know that in any campaign, most people aren't going to do what you want them to do. Most people aren't going to go click. Most people who click aren't going to buy. That's the rules of direct response. So we have contingency plans. If they don't click, do this. If they don't buy, do this, right? Where other systems don't. And also, we have specialized messages for specific behavior. We treat each person in the system differently based on what they do, right? Well, how did we encapsulate that into one big idea? It was called behavioral dynamic response, right? I came up with a series of words, in this case, 3 words. Notice how short these big ideas are, by the way. This is the longest one. Behavioral dynamic response, right? What that translates into is all of this. So if I'm with a business owner who's tried automation and they want something better, I say, oh, well, you need behavioral dynamic response. I don't expect them to go, you know what, you're right, here's my money. What I want them to do is go, what's that? I'm just opening the door just a little bit, turning the knob. That's all the big idea does. Now I can give the premise. Yeah, most people don't do what you want them to do in your campaigns. It's normal. Most people don't open the email. Most people don't click your website. And most of the people who click the website don't buy. Otherwise, we'd be the greatest marketers in history. We'd have a 51% or better conversion rate. There would be golden statues of us in the direct marketing hall of fame, right? It doesn't happen. So most people don't do what you want them to do. So you have to have contingency plans in place to automatically re-engage them. Here's how that works. Boom, right there. That now allows me to begin establishing positioning through education. So I turn the knob, behavioral dynamic response. What's that? Glad you asked, right? Here's how. I establish positioning through education, and then I can make the promise, all right? Which is, of course, increased sales through automation. If I were to lead with this promise, I would be just another guy selling automation. Just like if you lead with your promise, you're going to be just another person selling whatever, right? We have to make it different. By the way, $2 million. That's what that big idea was worth to me just in 2015 alone. $2 million, okay? It's worth doing the work. I know it's cerebral, and we're not talking about headlines and stuff yet. This is the stuff you do before the headlines. This is what makes everything superpowered. So how do you find your big idea? Well, on the worksheet you got, you start writing the answers to this. So number 1, what's their biggest desire as it relates to your stuff, right? What is it that they want? Number 2, what's your promise? That's easy. You've known your promise the entire time. Of course you've got your promise, so that'll be a simple one. Number 3, how do you fulfill this promise? What is unique about the way that you're fulfilling this? You look at these answers right here, and then from there you extract the big idea. And please, maybe you'll get it today. You never know. Like in these examples, I had 2 in one day. First time in history. Couldn't believe it. I was with the class. Oh, you got to be kidding me. How did this happen? Don't expect me to do this again, guys. It's a miracle. Don't tell anyone it happens. People might expect it regularly. Usually takes like a month or something. It took me 18 months to come up with behavioral dynamic response. 18 months. And then a year later, I made it even more succinct by calling it lead compounding. Same thing, right? So sometimes it takes a long time, but it's worth doing. Okay, so then you get your big idea here. Even if it's not perfect, who cares? Just have something. Then you write the premise behind it. What do you mean? So if the big idea is a statement that causes them to say, what do you mean? Your premise is what supports that statement, okay? The one thing I want to tell you is whenever I do this exercise with people in person, their big idea is usually a headline. The big idea is usually how to do something really cool without something in X amount of time or less. That's a promise. Don't confuse your big idea with the promise. We want 2, 3 words max that encapsulate that promise. We want to take that promise and make it a thing. We're really creating, we're performing alchemy right now. We're taking this promise that's abstract and we're turning it into a thing. We're taking the promise of automation and we're turning it into a thing called behavioral dynamic response. We're taking the promise of getting good reviews and getting customers trained to actually leave positive reviews, and we're turning it into a thing called predictable evangelism. We're taking the promise of work out really, really hard, be miserable, sweat all the time, and vomit on yourself as a result of doing this incredibly difficult but very effective exercises. We're turning it into a thing called muscle confusion, right? So we're performing alchemy. in this example. And that's what I want you to do here. The way to do it, answer these questions, write anything down here, write out your premise. If it's awesome, go with it. If it's not, walk away. Go for a walk, listen to some music, have a couple beers, chill out, whatever. Let your brain go to work. It'll come to you, usually when you least expect it. All right, so that ends the big idea positioning, or the big idea portion of this training. In our next segment, I want to show you what to do once we've opened the door. Remember, this big idea just opens your door. We still have to do a lot of work, and that work is done through positioning. So in the next little video, I'm going to show you how to use power positioning to get them to like you and want to buy from you even before you actually make a pitch. Pretty sweet. I'll see you there.